Hey guys, how we doing today? Today we are gonna paint up the eye. A couple hours ago, somebody asked me how I would handle one when I wasn't doing any scratching or erasing a realistic eye. This isn't fully photorealistic, but it's pretty close. So this is gonna be a full-length tutorial, and I will, gonna go ahead and roll the footage. It is real-time, full-length tutorial, and we'll see you guys in a little bit. All right, guys. To start with, I mixed up burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And I mixed like 3 drops of burnt sienna, 1 drop of ultramarine blue, which gives us a light grayish cast, a little bit on the oranger side from the burnt sienna. And then I added 1 drop of that to 5 or 6 drops of white to get this base color that I'm going to put in here. And that lightest color, as you can see up against white, what that color looks like. It's going to be a little different looking on the poster board because, as you can tell, the poster board's not a pure white. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll put it here. This is the lightest areas of the eye, or the lightest areas where light is getting reflected off of the eye. So I'm just going to put some of that color in here just to get rid of that white. And I'll bring it off into my other colors just a little bit so that it's easy to blend out. So as you can tell, it's starting to make a little bit of color here so that we're not a pure white. And then notice when I'm doing that, I'm adding kind of in a streaky pattern. This is going to be, very basic, but still we want to add just a little bit of texture to get just a little bit of realism in there as we go. And I will run that out a little bit so that I can blend my colors into it. Now I've added a little bit of white back to the same mix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate a little bit of texture here. And what I'm going to do is just go in here with some little figure eights. And it might be hard to make out what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm going to add just a few touches, and it's barely going to be noticeable. And because I've mixed the original color with it, and it's a grayish cast, and it's got a little bit more to the orange side, the blue shift won't show up very much, and where it does, I will be able to work with my later skin tones to kill any of that cast anyway. So I'm working like in a figure 8 motion. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with working with those textures like that, I will pop an info card. It'll pop up on your screen, and you'll be able to see that video that I talk about those. Or not. Much easier.
You're recording. Oh, you stopped it, then you started it again.
Now, if you remember that burnt sienna blue mix we talked about, I've mixed the same thing, and only I've used less white this time. I'm going to come in here, and we're going to, this lip underneath, before the eyelashes started, there's a little lip that's going to show up right there. We're going to put that in, and then let that blend out. Then we're gently going to put some color, start putting some color in here, and I'll start putting the lines, the creases, in the skin with some line work. As I get further, and I have light kind of hitting that cheek there, so as I get further away, I'm going to start blending this color in. Underneath, just underneath the eye, and then let that kind of blend out from there. It'll go to that lighter color from there. and we will use it we will start bringing our darker colors in. This edge is rounded, so I don't want to use like a harsh stencil line right there, because that eyelash or eyelid is rounded up. Really, when you get in here, I'm going to put some of that color under here, but we're going to put the eyelashes in later. It won't matter too much when we put after we put the eyelashes in. But I'm still going to use that color. I'm going to come in and create some streak lines. As we come in. And this is just creating some base texture. You've got that crease line above the eyelid, which is going to be really dark, but we'll go ahead and use the color we have now. And let it blend out just a little bit. Now as we get darker colors, we'll get tighter with it. Once I get the inside colors in, you're going to see how that creates a rounded effect. Over here, I'm going to take and put some crease lines in. So I'm going to come in, work really tight, put some lines in for creasing in the skin. You know, we're working on a pretty big piece, so these aren't really that difficult for me. And what I'm going to do is follow that up with kind of a texture, or not even a texture pattern. I'm just going to put this X shape . Kind of crisscrossing some lines there, as you can see. And we'll do a little of that down here, right off of the creases. Wherever the creases are. We don't want a lot because this is a female. But we gotta have some of that skin-like look. And now you notice I'm just working in that X shape, kind of what I call a figure eight with motion, sort of. And like I said, I will pop up again the card, so where I've got a video about these different freehand textures that I'm using here. As we continue in this way, we'll bring a little bit of that, a little more of those streaky line creases in here. Controlling the value by how much paint we put on the surface. And I'm going to just go a little bit harder here just so I can remember to shadow underneath there as we get with our darker color. And we'll just let that blend out on the paper in this particular instance. Now, I've gone back to that. Remember that highlight color I was working with earlier? Gone back to that. I'm going to come in here and touch a few spots. Now, if I work in really small spots, my blue shift won't really be noticeable. And of course, it's going to be up to you on how much detail you want to put into it. As you can see here, what I'm doing is working in these very tight little dots and stipplings. And how I'm really doing that is the bounce type texture. Again, click the info card if you're not familiar with any of these freehand techniques. And as long as I'm doing really small, tiny spots, and I'm careful, and I'm working on top of this orangish color, I won't have too much trouble with blue shift. I could always deal with that with a little bit of orange if I needed to. So I'm not hitting everything that I hit before. These are tinier details than what I had in here before. I'll go through here. Okay, now I have this color that is kind of vibrant, and we're going to be really careful if we use it like that. I could tone that down more. It's more of that burnt sienna, the straight burnt sienna mixed with white, and I'm going to use that to tone in, to shift a little bit, using that orange of that color to just blend everything in, shift everything in to the color tones that I think are going to be natural. If you do a step like this, you just want to be really gentle with it and careful with it. You can, as you come across things and come over things with it, it would take out any of that blue shift you got if you just very sparingly use. We haven't reached our final color yet. And then I'll just let it blend out into my paper from there. And this won't barely be visible because we'll have darker colors going on top of that. Now I've got just the burnt sienna and some blue, making this dark brownish tone. And we'll come in here and start defining our shadows, our deepest shadows on the outside edge. We're going to come back in with some dark colors on the inside as well. We'll let some of that line work run in. And we might even enhance these lines just a hair. I want to be very careful just to put very small amounts of paint. And I'll do a little bit more of that skin texture, figure 8 motion, as we blend out to the outside. And of course, what goes off the screen there doesn't much matter. We'll round that edge, let that blend out. We'll come over the top of that lip, even though most of that will get buried. We're going to come back in from the outside edge for our shadow. And you see how that's got a warm brown tone to it? And then we got to come in into our crease. Not super tight, but tighter than we were before. And then shadow from the crease out. And shadow from the crease out, then just let that disappear off into the paper because, well, we don't really care about that. It's not part of it. Okay, so now I have mixed up a bluish gray. So the way I did that is I put some ultramarine blue and some black in my cup, mixed that, and then I sprayed it out so that I didn't have to mix up a whole lot. And then I was able to, once I sprayed it all out, leaving a dirty cup, then sprayed my white, or added my white in from there. And I'm going to come in here, this iris, I'll protect the iris a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. And we're going to put some of that gray in the iris, or in the white of the eye, rather. I forget the technical term. We're going to use a little bit over here too. I know that looks way too dark right now, but it's not. Alright, as I'm painting this, you guys notice this is really, really dark on this side. And when I paint it, and you guys are watching the tutorial, it's going to look like I've gone crazy and I'm just really darkening it in. That's because the light is coming from this direction, and it creates a shadow, deep, deep shadow back here in the back side of the eye. So, I'm not crazy. That's what it looks like when it's done. Anyway, let's get back to work. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. I'm going to protect this line right there. And we're going to come in with this dark brown I've mixed up, which is burnt sienna mixed with some of that gray, and then darkened up just a little bit more from there. We're going to leave just a little of that gray sticking out past the iris. We'll put some rough look in there, just kind of some simulated texture in there. And I know that looks incredibly dark. It's not nearly as dark as you might think it is right now. Now, we're going to use a little bit of it down here. That's why I held off on the outside edge. I'll use just a little bit down here for this shadowed side. And we're going to use it back up in here. We're not going to go too deep into it. And we're definitely, remember, this is a brown. I know it looks really, really dark right now, but it's not as dark as you think it is. Now for in here, I have mixed up magenta and burnt sienna. It's going to be really, really dark in there. You're not going to see how warm that color is. And some of the choices I'm making is because I'm working with, remember some of the choices that I make on colors have to do with what colors I have available. So you may have to adjust your colors depending on what you have available. I have a video out on how to mix any color you want. Now when I get in here, I'm going to do some tight work. So I want to make sure my brush is flowing good. I want to bring that pinkish tone out. That pinkish brownish tone out into the eye very carefully. I'm also going to bring it around the edge of the eye. I'll have to do a little bit more later when I get to the iris. And then I'm going to tone in with that red on that outer edge here. And I'm just going to let that drift off to blend out into that lower lid. And I'm going to really carefully add some vein work. And that's a completely optional step. Notice how I'm barely letting any paint come out. Going really slow. And then we'll finish that off in there. Maybe let just a little of that magenta blend out into the eyelash. There we go. I think that's really cool looking skin there. And I didn't like this color I put in here, so I'm going to just gently warm it up using that magenta mix there. Without darkening it very much. And that's a transparent color, which is why I was able to do that. Okay, so now I have mixed up kind of a mustard yellow, a little bit of white, a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, or a little bit of yellow. And I'm gonna lay that color in everywhere except all. I want to stop it just a little bit shy of the glare of my eye. And getting around the outer edge, getting too far out, it's not a big deal because it's going to be really dark there. And I want to kind of put a little bit of texture in as I work, just kind of a sweeping motion. I'm always, if I'm freehanding like this, I'm always looking for ways to put the texture in with the, as I go with the airbrush. Even when I'm doing scratching and erasing techniques, I still like to put the texture in. And I'm putting some, in the glare of this eye, there's going to be some coloring going on. There's going to be some blues and some greens. So we'll put just a little bit of color in there. I have added a little bit more blue to the same mix, and then I'm going to start laying in a little bit of striation. just gonna I'll do up here from wide. And then I'm going to do this shaky circles. See how I'm kind of shaking and creating some texture. Kind of it's a Z pattern as I follow to the outer edge of my circle. All right. Just coming in, kind of some small strokes from the outside. No particular special pattern I'm trying to work here. We'll work on that green to the outside, definitely. We've got a lot of dark color that's going to be going in here. And we'll put some greens, like there's a forest or something, glistening into the Now I'm also intentionally going to just really gently throw a little of that green to the outside edge of that iris. And that's because you usually get just a little bit of coloring because your white of your eye is actually translucent. Now I have added a little bit of red to that green, made this dark, really dark olivish green here, and we will continue adding some details. Get a little bit of shadowing around there before I put my darkest color in the inside. We can put some of that in here, but still got to get a lot darker than that. And we'll do the same thing. I'm going to work in a little bit of some of that freehand texture effects. And some line work, kind of shaky line work going to the outside, combined with now you can get in here with some shields, things like that. Create these if you don't feel comfortable. creating lines like this with your freehand. Is the overlapping of different textures that are going to give us that. Looks like we put bazillion tons of work into it. Now I've added a touch of black to this, but we're still not a black. It still has that green cast to it. And now I've got this glare that runs in here, so we'll define that out and work around it. And don't worry, that glare is going to get a lot more in it. And just some lines that go to the outside, some little circles. Of course, you know, different eyes have different things inside them, so they're not all going to be the same. Important to keep that in mind. Come in here and start to blend out the outer edge with that darker color. It's important for me to leave that little glow spot on that shadowed side. And you could use texture shields, things like that, just to make this really pretty simple to get these textures in here. Because, you know, the reality is it doesn't have to be a match to anything. Because, again, no two eyes are going to be the same. I'm going to put this. Let that blend out just a little bit from there. And a little bit from the outside edge as well. Okay, I got some opaque light blue in here. Just a little bit on that outer edge as well. Just add a little more blue to that white. I gotta clean up this edge. As I darken, I'll clean up this edge and make it round out just a little bit better. It's a little off in proportion, I can see. I've got a little of a darker mix in here. I'm going to go ahead and darken in this pupil just a little bit more. You can quickly see it wasn't completely dark. This is a near black. You have to be really careful if you get to using a black like this. A little bit overwhelming if you go very far with it. I'm only using it where I'm intending to do some correction right now. And then before I get up to, now I've got one more thing to do before I can put those dark lines. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and put them in there. I'm gonna have reflections from the eyelashes above. One or two of them over here, because as the light is coming this direction, it would shine on those eyelashes and shadow into that. Now I can come in with some white easily, because we have some color in here that are grays and blues, and we create the highlights. In the eye. Nice crisp highlight right here. Don't have to worry about any blue shifts in this particular case. And we should put a little glisten right here on the bottom. Highlighting there. Sorry about the compressor. Yeah, we'll add a little bit more texture into the white of that eye. Yeah, just kind of Where I feel like it might be just a tad too much here, I'll just glaze this. Highlight right where it comes off the skin. Remember, we got oranges working in there, so we're all right. While I got my white out, I'll look. Things I think need a little touch up. I'm not going to worry about that top edge because, you know, not important right now. I should have blended that out better, but it's really not that important, not that big of a deal. As long as you go really fine with your whites, we're working on these orangish tones, you really don't have to get too concerned with blue shift. If you start getting any overspray, then you will start having a lot of trouble with blue shifts. But if you're doing small, fine lines like that, you won't have a whole lot of it on this particular color, on this particular part of the skin tone. And definitely don't have to worry about it where you have these blues in the white of the eye. And of course here, it just kind of enhances what those blues from the sky that you would expect to be. Yeah, we'll let that haze out just a little bit, create a little bit different look. Okay, looking a little weird now because, you know, there's no eyelashes on there. So now it's time to get in there. So I have mixed up red and black. So it's an almost black mix, but got just a little bit of warmth tone, and we're going to start putting these eyelashes in. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to let some of these lashes, we're going to put a few in, and we're going to be a little bit off and a little bit fuzzy. I'm going to add a little bit of coloring underneath there, just real gentle. And I could have mixed up a color to do that. Let's see, it's just got that warmth to it, so I can get away with that. And then I'm going to come in here with these small. You have to make sure your brush is working good, or you need to get a stencil out so that you don't ruin your picture. This is what those dagger strokes are. And make sure that you don't make them all the same. Just get me to a handle. I'm going to get over here. I'm going to have a couple that'll, again, be a little blurry. And then the direction is going to change. You have some really, really tiny ones. Now when I come in from the top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few lashes that are blurry, really out of focus. I'm going to put several of them in here, and they're going to define the outer edge of my lashes for me. Where I know where my stopping point is going to be as I'm working. Very important at this stage to keep your brush working. Now I want to come in over here from about midway back. I want to just put some rough texture in there because the eyelashes are thick and clumped up there. So it kind of gets all jumbled up and becomes this dark spot. And I'm going to get on this other side. I'm going to have a few really tiny ones that stick pretty far out over here. And then you'll have a pile of lashes. As we get over here, the lashes will come down over the eye from up further. And then as we get over here, and start bringing those lashes are going to come down, and they're going to be, you know, little details like this sometimes will really make sure your brush is working right. You gotta constantly be on the lookout for tip dry and things that might go haywire on you, because this is the last place you want to have mistakes. Of course, if you're working with if you're working with stencils, it's not that big a deal. Alright guys, that is going to be a wrap for today. I do appreciate those of you who have made it all the way through this video. If you have, please leave me a comment down below and give me a thumbs up, because if you made it this far, you had to like the video. And those of you who are new here, you might want to hit the subscribe button. I have over 120 videos out here on YouTube that you guys can go through on many different subjects. And that's going to be about it. That's going to be a wrap today. I'll leave you guys some links for some of the material I use down in the description and in the comments below. That's gonna be it. So, yeah, I will see you later.